look at what they could only describe as Galactic Federation headquarters, okay? And, of course, I'm sure that's not the name of it, but you get the idea. And sure enough, he ended up in this very strange place, and I'll just describe some of the things that they came up with. Back in the 90s, when I was dealing with this, if you talked about UFOs, you know, everybody would snicker at you at best and run from you at worst. And so some of this stuff was so bizarre that I knew that nobody was really going to pay much attention to it. But I think we've had a tremendous consciousness raising taking place since the 90s. Would you agree, George?
Oh, absolutely. And especially when it comes to remote viewing. I mean, you know, there are those, the official, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but the official view is, well, it's been debunked, it's not useful. You know from your research that our government knows this is a useful tool and is real, right?
Of course. Why else would they have continued to fund it through four separate administrations, both Democratic and Republican? And let me tell you, the way they got their funding is really interesting. Early on, of course, they would hold a meeting and, I don't know, maybe have flip charts or whatever and try to give the scientific background, and their reception was, let's just say, cool. Because at that time, nobody, particularly in the military or in the intelligence community, really even wanted to believe that psychic ability was real. So, but what they finally evolved to was bringing in congressmen and military officers who would buy their product, who would pay the bills, and they get them to do it themselves. And after they said, then they go, holy cow, I did it. This really works. And they get their funding.
Have you tried it?
I have. I've even been tested on it. And apparently I'm pretty good, which doesn't surprise me because I had figured out years ago that the reason that I tended to be a pretty good reporter was because I had learned to trust my intuition.
You can tell when people are lying to you.
Exactly. And, you know, it's a combination of things. It's body language and it's tone and eye contact. And it's not, now I'm not going to say I can't be fooled. I probably I have and I probably will. But I'm really pretty good at it. One experience I had was I went over to Dallas to an office to do some testing for remote viewing. And I walked in this office, a very long rectangular office, and I never really got past about the first quarter of the office. Walked in, there was a desk there, and there was a table, and I sat down. And the very first coordinate number that I was given, I went through the protocols, and all I could see was this potted plant, you know. And then, so I opened my eyes and I'm saying, I think I've got a problem. And I looked at the far end of this office was a potted plant that looked very much like what I was seeing in my mind's eye. So I said, okay, let's start over. And so I followed the coordinates again, and all I could see was this damn plant. So finally, after about 3 times, I said, hey, let's just stop this. I said, I don't know what's going on. I said, but all I keep seeing is that plant down there over in the corner over there, which I'd never gone to. And the person that was testing me said, well, what do you get about that plant? And I said, well, I get that it's not real. You know, it's some sort of artificial thing. And so he pulled out the envelope, opened up the object of my test, and guess what it was? It was the plant in the corner. And I walked down there, and not only had I seen that plant, and I had not noticed it when I came in the office, but I noticed it after I had seen it remote viewing, and then I felt of it, and of course it was plastic. It was not real.
You think everybody has some ability in that regard?
Yes. In fact, the testing that was done at Stanford Research Institute confirmed 2 amazing things. One, that everybody they tested, and that included trained and experienced military officers, all the way down to people almost that they just pulled in off the street. Everybody they tested has this ability to one degree or another. Of course, that's like saying you and I both have the ability to play Chopin on the piano.
Or dance for that matter.
Or dance, yeah. But if you practiced enough and had a teacher and practiced, yes, you could. and yes, everybody could. And, of course, some people are better at it naturally than others, but what they found was everybody had the ability. And the other amazing thing they found was that this ability is not limited by time or space. They have successfully remote viewed other planets, and then a decade later, when they sent out a space probe and they started getting the readings and the photographs back, the remote viewing was confirmed, and feedback, as they call it. And so it's just amazing. But
I'll tell you,
let me stress here, and I think you understand this, George, but for the sake of your audience, I just want you to understand that remote viewing is really not even the name of the function. The function is psychic function, which has been called clairvoyance. It's seeing with the mind's eye. The remote viewing actually describes the protocols, the techniques that they learned and devised in the military so that people could call up this ability on demand and self-interrogate themselves to the point of making it a useful source of information. And so what I'm trying to say is, if you think you can just sit down in a chair and see what's happening on Mars, it ain't going to happen. You really have to follow the strict protocols. You have to really work at it, practice. And so it's not a matter of buying a book or buying a tape and just doing it. Although in my book, Sci-Spies, I do offer a outline of the protocols and how a person could sit down and go through these techniques and practice up well enough that they might, if they had some ability, they might get pretty good at it.
I'll tell you what, we're going to have time tonight, and I have every intention of getting into some of the specifics that you learned from these Sci-Spies, some of the things they saw, because a lot of it is really dark. I mean, some of the stuff from Alien Agenda, I haven't seen Sci-Spies yet, but Alien Agenda is very spooky, very dark, and disturbing. But we'll get to that in a moment. I think in the next minute before we take a break, I wanted to ask you about sort of the overall link, the umbrella between all these conspiracies you've written about. JFK, UFO, the Sci-Spy stuff, 9/11. You remember Webb Hubbell, the legal advisor to the Clintons, when he says that he wrote that when the Clintons came into the White House, they said, we want to know about two things, JFK and UFOs. Now, it might seem that they're unrelated, but you know what? I think we're going to have to finish this question that went on too long when we come back after this break. Stick around with the fascinating Jim Marrs. We'll be right back with more of Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back, everyone. We're speaking with the one and only Jim Marrs, best-selling author. As I mentioned a little bit ago, I reread his classic best-selling book, Alien Agenda, a couple of weeks ago. And, man, there's parts of this that'll put goosebumps on your arm and other body parts, specifically when he's speaking about remote viewing. And Ingo Swann and some of those early guys who, when they went through the protocols, would come up with some very weird stuff. Among the things that they saw were these objects about the size of hand grenades that circle the Earth, sort of making our planet, a quarantine zone created by some other intelligence for their own dark purposes. And when we come back, we're going to ask Jim Marrs what those remote viewers saw and what they think those purposes were. Stick around on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast, everyone. I'm George Knapp. I'm joined by our guest, Jim Marrs. And I was going on with about a 4-minute question there before we went to the break, Jim. And the question was about Webb Hubbell, who was the legal counsel to Bill Clinton. And when Bill Clinton was elected president, he assigned his friend Webb Hubbell, as you know, and as Webb Hubbell later wrote, he assigned him 2 jobs. He said, find out who killed JFK and find out what's the deal with UFOs. And while those topics might seem to be unrelated, do you see, after all your years of researching this, do you see commonalities between those alleged conspiracies and others, either in terms of money or people or power or whatever?
Well, yes, I do. And first let me point out that Webster Hubbell in his book said he was never satisfied with the answers he got, which means that he could only report unsatisfactory answers to his friend Bill Clinton, which means that the President of the United